Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Law and Legitimacy. It's Monday, October 30th, 2023, one day before Halloween. Mark your calendars. Tomorrow we're going to have a special discussion of the 50th anniversary of The Exorcist. Boy, have I got a treat in store for you. Now, if you want to do a little bit of homework and get ready for it, take a look at the essays. There were 3 of them in the New York Times over the weekend about The Exorcist. Extraordinary essays, and we'll have a good time. But I want to save that for Tuesday. Today, let's talk about a real horror, as opposed to the horror our imagination presents us. And I'm referring to events in Israel and Hamas's attack on Israel on October 7th. If you haven't had a chance yet, take a look at Peggy Noonan's article in the Wall Street Journal over the weekend. Israel tries to part the fog of war. That's the title of the essay. And I've said this before, I'll say it again. The weekend edition of the Wall Street Journal should be must reading if for regular listeners to this podcast or viewers of this podcast. The Wall Street Journal does not do a Sunday edition. It takes Sundays off. And so Saturday mornings, you can pick up an edition that has one of the best book review sections that is published on a weekly basis and has a series of thoughtful essays. Noonan is usually the first thing I read on a Saturday morning, and she did not disappoint. She writes about Israel's effort to educate the world about what's at stake in its current war with Hamas. And I saw many references to an extraordinary press briefing in the press over the weekend that the Israeli Defense Force had in Tel Aviv last week. They invited hundreds of journalists to come to an event, and they showed at that event a 43-minute video that they refused to distribute to the public, but that they let these journalists view. And this video comprises live contemporaneous accounts of what Hamas was up to when it invaded Israel on October 7th, killing 1,200 or so people, taking 200 more hostage. The videos were in part compiled from security cameras along the border of Israel and Hamas. There were also body cam video images from terrorists who were killed at the time. And Hamas, or the IDF, is showing this to journalists to put into context Israel's activities. Noonan's piece talks about that, and I'll talk about it in a minute, some of the discrete images. But I don't know that the Israeli Defense Force woke up this morning thinking, we should check in with Law and Legitimacy to see what these folks are saying. Well, they should. Because what they should do is they should show the world this 43-minute video. The words that I'm going to read to you are shocking enough, but the images, in my opinion, would settle the case on how Israel ought to respond to Hamas. It ought to root it out, it ought to destroy it, and it ought to show no mercy to members of Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist organization who set its sight on destruction that has set its sights on the destruction of Israel and the murder of innocent Israeli citizens. Listen to this. This is from Graham Wood in The Atlantic, according to Noonan. Men, women, and children are shot, blown up, hunted, tortured, burned, and murdered in any horrible manner you could predict, and some that you might not. This is what's on that film that the IDF has shown to journalists I say should show the world. A man and his young son are in pajamas. A terrorist throws a grenade into their hiding place, and the father is killed. The boys are covered in blood, and one appears to have lost an eye. They go to the kitchen and cry for their mother. One of the boys howls, "Why am I alive? Daddy, Daddy," one says. "I think we're going to die." The terrorist who comes in, who thrown the grenade, comes into their kitchen, and while they're weeping, he raids the refrigerator. Time for a little post-murderous treat. There's another one where a terrorist uses his phone to call his family in the Gaza Strip. "I just killed 10 Jews with my own hands," he exclaims, telling his father. "Put on Mom. Your son is a hero." He tells him to open WhatsApp to see his pictures. Other footage, according to Andrew Nell of The Spectator, shows IDF soldiers beheaded with their lifeless corpses left splayed in the streets. The BBC noted the stark detail of the sheer horror. Hamas gunmen cheered with joy as they shot unarmed civilians on the road. There was an attempt to decapitate someone who appeared to be still alive using a garden hoe. An emergency medical worker poured mineral water to douse the smoldering remains of charred bodies, brutalized young women, one of them naked. Victims are seen gagged, faces are frozen in shock and agony. Women's bones are broken, their legs twisted in impossible angles. Later, the Twitter account of the Israeli government showed clips of their interrogation of Hamas prisoners. One is asked what his mission was in Be'eri. To conquer, he replied. I mean, these images reflect why Israel has reacted as it does, as it is. And its reaction is measured. Hamas has chosen to tunnel, to build a hundreds of mile long network of tunnels beneath the Gaza Strip, some reaching into Israel, some reaching into Egypt. And those tunnels are beneath civilian areas. And they've stored weapons beneath hospitals, schools, and elsewhere. Hamas is using a civilian population as a screen, engaging in acts of barbarism, and then telling the Israeli government, you can't attack us, you might hurt civilians. I think what the message to the folks in the Gaza Strip is, rise to the level of the humanity you share with the rest of the world and oust Hamas. Turn on Hamas. Don't let Hamas use you. Israel should not indiscriminately seek to bomb, harm, or otherwise destroy the lives of civilians, but it has no responsibility to sit back and let the civilians be used as a shield for animals on legs. I'm talking about Hamas. And so I stand with Israel's desire and need, and the world's need, for Hamas to be destroyed. I understand the law of warfare to require a proportionate response. I also understand that the law of warfare forbids a combatant to use civilians as shields in international conflict. And so in this conflict where Hamas is violating the law of warfare, Israel is trying to engage in a proportionate response by issuing warnings to civilians to leave the area, and civilians don't leave. What should Israel do? Will wait for the next attack? Or does it launch the attack, understanding that necessarily there will be civilian casualties, against the hope that the people of the Gaza Strip come to realize that Hamas is using them? So, if you're a member of the Israeli Defense Force, or folks, if you know anybody who has access to them, we want to see that video. The world needs to understand what's at stake in the conflict on the Gaza Strip. And what's at stake is not the history of Israeli oppression of the Palestinians. The fact of the matter is, prior to the creation of the state of Israel, there was no state in Palestine. It was a territory operated under international law as part of the British Mandate. The United Nations and others carved the area up into an Arab state and to a Jewish state. And on the Declaration of Independence of Israel, the Arab state didn't invest in the infrastructure of the territory it had. It launched an attack on Israel with the desire to push the Jews into the sea. Israel won that war and a series of others and expanded its territory to protect itself. There was a Palestinian state, but no one in the Arab world was prepared to invest in it. It is time to find a two-state solution. It is time to stand with humanity against barbarism. And in my view, it is time to stand behind Israel as Israel seeks to root out a terrorist cancer metastasizing on its border. And I support Israel's desire and need to vigorously take out those tunnels at any cost. So,
I think the difficult part of this is, number one, I recall that as the stuff was breaking, early on, X is a platform that, for better or for worse, Elon Musk's takeover has allowed that platform to go uncensored in many respects. And one is that, these videos were readily available, Norm, as stuff was breaking, as images and videos of civilian areas in Israel were being invaded. There were images coming out of there that were really difficult to stay with.
Yeah. Well,
and subsequent to that, this is, I think, the larger issue that I have with the way that this is being handled here stateside, is that only one side of this conflict is allowed to promote videos, and it is not Israel. And I say allowed because I do think that there is some engineering going on based on the big tech companies that are responsible for trafficking and all of this information. And the real war being fought right now is Israel trying to compete with algorithms that are tipping the balance toward the pro-Hamas side of things. And
Well,
this is a broader war going on around the world, but certainly making things domestic here. And my concern is necessarily that people might still not appreciate how the level of despair that we are as people capable of creating for ourselves, and what occurs in Israel can very easily occur here. That is not
and is occurring here. I mean, look, one of the things we created this page for was to be a voice for a civilizing influence and a decision to call out the consequences, the wages of sin where we see it. And an appeal to grace through the institutions of Western civilization, which we refuse to apologize for. Make no mistake about it. The tactics that Hamas engaged in come from the same hellhole that the concentration camps came from. And anyone who's prepared to stand by, tolerate it, and wink at it is morally blind and deserves public censure. And they will get nothing but that from us. Hey, I had an interesting experience Friday. I want to pivot to sin, my favorite topic, and grace, something I don't know enough about. I've been trying to enter the stand-up comic world, and so I was going to go to an open mic in Northern Connecticut Friday night at a comedy club in a mall in Manchester. And I got there and realized the open mic wouldn't occur until sometime after 11 p.m. And that was just too late for this old man after a long week. So I went to the local bookstore, Barnes and Nobles. It's at the Manchester Mall in Manchester, Connecticut. And I found something that I hadn't seen much of in recent years, a great magazine rack. You remember the days of magazine racks? You'd walk in and there were Sports Illustrated, Guns and Ammos, Scientific American, The Atlantic,
Car and Driver, everything.
Car and Driver, Knitting Today, and you could pick 4 or 5 things and go home with a whole new world in your bag that you could open in the evening. And it was just different than browsing online, because when you're browsing online, you're in your trench, and the algorithms are throwing stuff at you that they think you will like based on what you've seen before. When you're physically present in response to this great panoply of experience, you actually have more choices, and you're more likely to stumble on something you wouldn't otherwise have seen. Well, one of the things I stumbled on was a journal that I'd seen before, and I don't know if I've ever read it, but I picked up a copy of it because the titles looked so good. It was the Hedgehog Review. And folks, take a look. It's online because everything's online these days. It's www.hedgehogreview.com. But the article that caught my eye was The Wages of Sin.
I think on the screen here, The Wages of Estrangement, Paul Tillich on Sin and Paul Tillich's Sin by Charlie.
Yeah, so the title was Paul Tillich on Sin. Paul Tillich was a mid 20th century theologian, emigre from Germany, who lived in Manhattan, taught at the Union Theological Seminary when people still believed that God was a worthy topic in seminaries, and wrote a 3-volume piece called Systematic Theology. I remember on my 21st birthday, my girlfriend had bought me a tracksuit, and she said, and I said,
Norm Pattis in a tracksuit.
I said, really, what I hoped you'd buy me was that 3-volume set of Paul Tillich's Systematic Theology I'd seen over at the bookstore. And she was such a sweetheart. By day's end, I had it. And so, but Tillich is notoriously difficult, the way continental theologians can be. But Charlie Riggs's essay on Tillich on Sin had a wonderful discussion of grace in there. And, we've talked about sin as love of the wrong thing and of the defining power and need for grace in our lives. But I've never come across as elegant a discussion of grace as I'm about to read you. This comes at the end of the essay on page 31. It's just before the headline, A Failed Project of Reunification, subheading. And this is Tillich quoted by Riggs. Sometimes at that moment, a wave of light breaks into our darkness. And I'll interpret this. And I'm talking about the darkness that we all experience when we're overcome by, let's say, one of the 7 deadly sins: lust, anger, rage, greed, despair, even anger, let's say, at Israel or at Hamas in the Middle East. I can become filled with vengeance. A friend of mine with strong roots in the Jewish community wrote me a text: "What do you make of events in the Gaza Strip? What should we do?" And my response was, "Pave the Gaza Strip." It was just one of anger. It was unreasoning anger, reasoning that knew no bounds, that clouded my soul with darkness, that emptied me of the light that seeks to shine within myself and that seeks to shine within us all. Sometimes at that moment, a wave of light breaks into our darkness, and it is as though a voice were saying, "You are accepted. You are accepted, accepted by that which is greater than you, and the name of which you do not know. Do not ask for that name now. Perhaps you will find it later. Do not try to do anything now. Perhaps later you will do much. Do not seek for anything. Do not perform anything. Do not intend anything. Simply accept the fact that you are accepted." And that's a powerful, powerful notion. Because when I say that sin is love of the wrong thing, what I think it means is that we create images that we seek to pursue, and those images become false idols. And in the service of those idols, we are inclined to bend the human psyche in ways that create discomfort and unintended consequences for ourselves and others. Tillich goes on to write, "If that happens to us, if we can simply accept the fact that we are accepted, if that happens to us, we experience grace. After such an experience, we may not be better than before. I can testify to that. I am a man of unclean lips. As Paul once said, I do that which I would not do. That is the definition of sin. After such an experience, we may not be better than before, and we may not believe more than before, but everything is transformed. In that moment, grace conquers sin, and reconciliation bridges the gulf of self-estrangement. And nothing is demanded of this experience: no religious, no moral or intellectual presupposition, nothing but acceptance. I mean, folks, if the words are on the screen, I encourage you to read the essay. What you'll learn is that Tillich was a sinner, and that Tillich felt that the very essence of sin was estrangement. And of course, the Christian theology of original sin is that there's something in the structure of being, something in the structure of the universe itself that creates a sense of human estrangement, that we struggle against being the fundamental sense of our homelessness in the world. And we are all sinners in search of home. And the message of Christian theology is that we can find one by acts of grace. That we don't create it for ourselves, that we accept the fact that we are accepted, that we respond to the unconditional love of God and the world. So I bring this essay to your attention just because of the power of those words. Tillich earlier says, "When we walk through the dark valley of a meaningless and empty life, it strikes us when we feel that our separation is deeper than usual because we've violated another life, a life which we loved, from which we are estranged. It strikes us when our disgust for our own being, our indifference, our weakness, our hostility, our lack of direction and composure have become intolerable to us. It strikes us when year after year the longed-for perfection of life does not appear, when the old compulsions reign within us as they have for decades, when despair destroys all joy and courage." That's the sense of estrangement that any candid human being above the age of 13 knows. And yet we continue to go on. And I think what makes it possible to go on is grace. So I ask you to take seriously the Hedgehog Review. I'm buying Mike a subscription. There's another essay that we'll discuss later in the week by John Milbank, Toward a Personalist Metaphysics of History. What? You say? What? Can you say that again quickly 3 times? Yes, toward a personalist metaphysics of history, towards a personalist metaphysics of history, towards a personalist metaphysics of history. I did it. I think what he's saying is, in our time, when everything has been compressed into sociology, we need nonetheless to have a sense of the personal significance of the individual's response to himself and to others as something more than the product of historical forces. That used to be called accountability before those notions became quaint. So again, the Hedgehog Review, folks, check it out. Charlie Riggs, Paul Tillich. What you'll learn is that Tillich had his own issues, but he had the courage to be himself, and he had the courage to accept and reflect the power of grace in the world in spite of its shortcomings.
Don McNeil says, when the truth is found to be lies and all the joy within you dies, don't you want somebody to love? Grace Slick Theology.
Wow. That works, Dawn. Thank you for that. I'd sing it, but I think I might break the airwaves and we'd lose our listeners. United Airlines is being sued for discrimination. It turns out that the Los Angeles Dodgers are too cheap to buy their own airplane. I mean, they're weighing their money. Well, how much does it cost to sit behind the first baseline at Dodger Stadium, whatever it's called? Probably a couple $100. And for this, you'd think they'd spring for a plane for their own team. But no, they charter planes from United. And when they charter those planes, they place conditions on the charter. They want good-looking women to serve as flight attendants. Imagine that. They're paying top dollar. I mean, the nerve of it.
Yeah. So we've decided in the Rumble chat that the tracksuit that you were gifted was velour, number one, and it was royal purple.
Actually, it was blue, and it wasn't velour, and it had little white stripes down the side.
Yeah, so you got an Adidas tracksuit that was probably period specific, which Run DMC-esque, right? And so we're gonna imagine you in your blue tracksuit with the three stripes. Sitting on okay, so it wasn't Adidas then. And then we're going to imagine you on a charter flight with the LA Dodgers because the colors actually work there. And now, Norm, go from there. We're going to do some improv for you. Go from there.
Yeah. So I'm on the plane with the Dodgers, right? And we're flying. We're going to go over, I guess, to play in New York. And it's a long flight. And so, there got to be stewardesses on the plane. I guess we call them flight attendants now. Why? Because everything is a gender issue, right? Remember when we had stewardesses? They were young, they were good looking, they were pretty, and every guy on the plane fantasized that they'd be a member of the Mile High Club. I mean, you used to make trips to the bathroom hoping one of the stewardesses would meet you in there, and you could say, I did it a mile high in the air. Well, we can't do that anymore. We can't have stewardesses because males have to be there. So they have to be stewards. But wait a minute, why this steward stuff? I mean, how do you, what pronoun do you use with a steward? Because steward is a male, stewardess is a female. So I've got it. Ready? It's a steward. Steward. My pronoun is it. I'm a steward. Well, so the Dodgers, they've got a thing. They want young, good looking, blonde, thin women to serve the Dodgers on the plane. And now members of United are upset about this, the steward apparently fat, black, ugly women feel like they're being discriminated against because now, how are you going to be a member of the Mile Wide Club unless some woman with thunder thighs has a trouble fitting her way down the seat saying, you want something to drink? I want something to drink. Give me some hemlock. If I've got to look at you any longer, I think I'm going to be sick. We've got Fat Lives Matter. Now we've got Ugly Lives Matter. My jiggle is precious, baby. Don't you dare disrespect my thunder thighs. You get the drill. So I don't know if you really want to be served drinks by a porker popping out of the seams to squeeze through the aisles. I mean, it's just not what I want.
Well, I'm going to read from this Reuters article. So let's see. We've got Dawn Todd and Darby Quezada, who are the plaintiffs, and they filed this action in LA Superior Court. And they're saying that they were passed over in favor of other flight attendants who were, quote, white, young, thin women who are predominantly blonde and blue-eyed and, quote, fit a certain look.
They were good. Yeah, these were the sort of people that used to be Victoria's Secrets models. And Victoria's Secrets is coming back now. After having the plus size 14 women out there, we're starting to get back to petite. There's nothing wrong with a little bit of old-fashioned lust.
Attractive modeling has fallen on hard times, right? So now these are the types of consequences, Norm, I think that no one thinks about when they're like, oh, okay, we're going to do this program for Victoria's Secret now. And sorry, fewer models are going to get through. Fewer attractive models are going to get through. This is the downstream consequence of that, Norm. They're going to go into some sort of profession where their looks are going to get them further, right? But here, I'll keep going. So Dawn Todd is 50 years old and she's black. And Darby Quezada is 44 And according to Reuters, she is Mexican, Black, and Jewish.
Well, that's a trifecta of some sort. If she were crippled, she'd probably be president of a corporation.
And they said that they've both worked for United for more than 15 years, and they're seeking damages for alleged discrimination and harassment. So here's my thing. Don't we know that the airlines are union jobs?
Yeah.
Okay.
Aren't they?
So I'm just making a point that the 15 years of service to United might not be as impressive or as meritocratic as one might otherwise observe. Loyalty for 15 years. My most recent experience in an airport was simply this, and I'm not alone in this. I've talked to other people about it privately, but there were more employees in that airport than there were passengers in that airport. And this is a major airport. And most of these employees are not doing anything. What I'm saying is these airlines and these terminals are employing people, and they don't know how to get rid of them, period. Yeah. Right? Because that's what unions have done to airlines, right? Can't get any more elbow room, can't get any more room for your knees. You have to pay up for, whatever the next class is, and then first class. Is that even first class anymore, Norm?
Well, sometimes it's business class, but sometimes it is first class. I mean, I'll be honest with you, when I fly, I always get first class or business class because I don't want to wait online all day and then get separated from my carry-on bag and have to engage in a Thomas Hobbesian struggle where life is nasty, poor, solitary, brutish, and short to get my bags to get off the plane. So you can get the legroom, you pay for it though.
Well, so point being that these two plaintiffs perhaps, I don't know, what are we saying? Is this age discrimination, Norm?
No, it's aesthetic discrimination. If nobody wants to look at you, the Dodgers don't have to put you on the plane. Welcome to United. It's not what I want to hear when I'm a member of the Los Angeles Dodgers making about $8 million to throw a ball at somebody and run around the bases.
And look at United falling over itself to be stupid. In a statement, United said, quote, United fosters an environment of inclusion and does not tolerate discrimination of any kind. We believe this lawsuit is without merit, just like their looks are, and intend to defend ourselves vigorously. The LA Times reported the lawsuit earlier on Friday. The Dodgers are not a defendant. A team spokesperson said the Dodgers do not comment on pending litigation.
Of course they're not a defendant. What are they going to say? We want the hotties? I mean, look, I don't think that they have a roster where you go through and like, oh, that one's hot, that one's not. But I think if you're United and you want to sell your services, you put your best face forward. I mean, you don't put the porker from Victoria's Secret in the size 20 jumpsuit on and say, hey, guys, anybody want to be a member of the Mile Wide Club? No, these guys would be looking for Dramamine rather than coffee.
Well, this is the best part, I think. So we've got the case site down at the bottom, but just to finish this out, both plaintiffs said United's treatment cost them income and led to severe panic attacks. Losses of self-esteem and sleep and other conditions requiring psychological treatment. So for those of you...
Go to a fat farm. You don't need psychological treatment.
so for those of you who might be curious as to why that would be included in the law in this article, well, any civil claim for damages has to allege damages. And often the time in plaintiff's cases, if there is no physical harm, the only way a plaintiff's attorney can actually substantiate a claim for damages that isn't statutorily created is to also have clients that will go to a physician and allege certain conditions and get treatment and actually have a diagnosis that would, support or bookend the lawsuit in full, right? So it's a necessity of law on one hand, but yes, it is also an absurdity on the other.
So I understand United's desire to cater to the Dodgers. I understand the Dodgers' desire to have stewardesses of a certain type on board. I understand the world's desire to include everyone and claim that everybody's beautiful. But the fact is that not everybody is. And the Dodgers should get what they want if they're going to spend the money to fly on a chartered United jet. I mean, it's not as though the Dodgers are traveling from location to location on Hamas Air. Think about Hamas Airlines. Hello, this is Captain Al-Akbar. Welcome to your one-way flight to Jerusalem. Everybody buckle up unless you're Jewish. And then the stewardesses go down the aisle with hijabs on.
Well,
anyone want a Molotov cocktail? Come on.
Be on it. one of these two couldn't be on that flight.
Oh, I don't know, Mike. I guess I'm a male of a certain age, and I'd rather be a member of the Mile High Club, the Mile Wide Club. But the notion that even the appearance of stewardesses has to be politicized and litigated is a little hard to take. So let's keep an eye on this lawsuit. I don't know that aesthetics are a protected class anymore, and I'm sure United has to take this flight seriously, or this litigation seriously. But I mean, are we going to have ugly discrimination now too? Yeah.
Well, this is part of this is the worst part of corporate culture internally in America in 2023 and beyond, is that there are employees in every company that they are checking certain intersectional boxes. And then when you put these things in the context of publicly traded companies, perhaps that are unionized, perhaps these situations bear quite a lot of discovery. So if you're United, you're digging into the personnel files and you're having to revisit any and every instance of conduct that was perhaps subject to disciplinary policy. You're having to pull up any and every protocol available, which makes this such a ridiculous endeavor, and one likely that will settle just so that United can move on from it.
Dawn asks, would I make these lustful arguments in court? Yeah, I might. I mean, it depends on who the jury was. I do think that a little bit of common sense and a return to the animal magnetism that defines the human race is perhaps necessary. Dawn, look around you. There are 8 billion or so people wandering the face of the earth. Not one of them would be here without the fact of human desire. We are all consequences of the sin of lust or the sin of desire. And there's nothing wrong with beauty, and there's nothing wrong with knowing what you like, I think.
Well, let's see. We've got one Rumble comment here from Lawyer Will. What's up, Lawyer Will? Aesthetic discrimination is now called lookism. I'm ready for the crazies to start campaigning about this. Lookism. Well,
yeah, I mean, clearly I don't get the benefits of being as handsome and suave and good looking as Lawyer Will, or even Mike for that matter. I suffer from not only ageism, but turtle. I identify as a turtle in my dotage. And don't turtles have rights too? Should turtles be stewardesses? Dawn, I think I've offended you at some level, and I hope that's okay. We can all be offended still. So listen, we've run to the end of our tether. Tomorrow we'll talk some more. Remember, we're going to talk about the 50th anniversary of The Exorcist on Halloween. Do your homework, read the piece in the New York Times. What's that?
I said, what's that?
The Exorcist? You've never seen The Exorcist?
I'm kidding. All right. Well, look, we'll be back tomorrow morning. We will talk about The Exorcist and anything under the sun that has to do with law and or legitimacy that can fit into 30-minute slots. Anyway, 8 a.m. Eastern. Find us on X at LawPod Daily. Subscribe on YouTube and on Rumble. We're there live as well. Hit the notification bells on all those platforms. And most importantly, right now, just make sure you hit that thumbs up video wherever you are. If you're on X, repost it, hit the little heart. If you're over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Overcast, Audible, etc., leave us 5 stars or just leave us alone. Norm, strong weekend coming here. Looking forward to knocking out 4 more days.
Yeah, let's get it done.
All right. See you tomorrow.